For non-finance students that we have in our class, let me explain also a bit of fundamentals of accounting for which is common in hospitality industry and also in other industries. Just as an additional resource, I thought to share with you. So there are three main fundamentals of accounting apart from the journal entries and everything else. Usually we follow in accounting is accruals, allocations, and the prepayment. So there usually are accruals. So let's understand them in one by one. So accruals means that we have to record the expenses as they occur, not as when we pay them. So it's a very simple concept of accounting. So there are two bases of accounting. One is cash basis, one is accrual basis. So in cash basis, we recognize the income and expenses when we either receive them or pay them. So there is no matching concept. So revenue received in 1 month or 1 year can be matched with the expenses incurred in another year. So normally we follow the accrual basis of accounting, which means that we record the revenue or expenses as and when we are incurring them. I means they are due for payment, not when we have to pay. So if the electricity bill of this March, this month of May has not arrived to your desk by the time of finalization of books, you will make an accrual of those expenses so that you have a record that you need to pay the bill for May, not when you actually pay them. So usually that's where most of the uh, accountants or most of the simple accountants fail to understand the concept of this accrual. So every month we need to see what we were supposed to pay, what we have paid, and if we have not paid, we have to record those expenses and record the liability. In hotels, usually since there are many expenses like that, so accrual accounting makes it very important for recognition. So every month we look at the previous month accruals and see which one of them we have paid. Or one method to make it easier is to reverse all the accruals that we have made last month. Means whatever we think we have not paid last month, we record it. We will remove it and then we reassess everything, say that okay, until when we have paid certain expenses. So accrual is very easy to do when the expenses are reoccurring, but the chief accountant has to make sure they have a system to understand if there is any other expenses or any other services which are happening this year, this month, is also being recorded, because there may be certain ad hoc things, like for example there may be a function in the hotel for which you were supposed to receive some bills which you have not received. What And you did not really recorded those expenses into the books, and when you are recording in the next month, the income has already been recorded in the past. So it's not a nice thing to show an expense in a month where there is no revenue for it, because it may be misleading for the when we are reviewing the profit and loss statement. So the chief accountant has to keep an eye on all the functions, all the happenings in the hotel, and make sure that they are receiving the bills for those. So it's a not a easy job making the accruals, because you need to keep an eye on everything, and you need to keep a mental note of that this certain events or certain things may incur into the expenses. So the information flow is very important. You may have to look at the pending purchase order, you may have to look at the revenue sheets to make sure if there is anything which is outsourced, whether to make sure that the bill has been received. So there is usually a process which we are going to discuss when we are discussing the general accounting in details, and how we make sure that the accruals are done properly without missing any information. So so that's the accrual accounting, right? So the benefit of cash basis of accounting is the is easy to do, but it's impossible to analyze the revenue and expenses, and also it can be separate, right? But the accrual basis of accounting is also an international standard. Now no country allows cash basis of accounting even for individuals, right? So mostly accrual basis of accounting is the norm nowadays, but there is usually a lot of mistakes happening between when you either you make a double accrual or either you forget to make an accrual. So usually the chief accountants has to be very careful in this aspect. The next concept is the allocation. So the allocation means that we are having a common expenses which we record in one cost center. For example, I shared we have a F&B administrative department, right? Where you have marketing, which is doing marketing for all the F&B cost centers. Or the restaurants. Now, these expenses, because we don't have an F&B cost center P&L, we want to understand the profitability of each restaurant separately. The cost has to be allocated. Or even simple example where when we are buying, let's say certain flowers for all the departments, like, so when we are buying flower, we don't buy for room, or we don't buy for restaurant, or we don't buy for spa separately, right? We buy for everybody. So it has to be allocated based on their usage to every department, so that the real profitability of every department can be ascertained. So that job is done by allocation, and usually in hospitality accounting, it's one of the major factor which can break or make the profitability of the individual departments, because there are many expenses which are common. There are common food expenses, there are common flower expenses, there are common decoration expenses, there are common marketing expenses. So those has to be allocated to the departments. So uh, is allocated to each cost center to calculate the real profitability metrics, and they are always measure how we allocate them. So there will be laundry expenses, means because laundry is one, is not going to clean only for F&B or only for rooms department or only for spa. So it has to be allocated. So normally, let's say for example, there is a basis of either number of pieces or by kilogram. There is a flower decoration, canteen, amenities, kitchen expenses, stewarding expenses. So these are the expenses which are common, which are incurred in by a common department but allocated to the user departments. So there is always a measure. So the chief accountants has to really understand how the costs are derived in these departments, and how the output is distributed, how the workload is coming. So every hotel may have a different structure, so you have to really understand how you are going to make a equitable cost allocation to create a real profitability. So that we will be learning in our live class more. Then the last concept is the prepayment. So in hotels, usually there are, even in general accounting, there are multiple payments which we have to pay in advance. For example, license, for example, rentals. Even in hotels, there is a specific examples like uniforms. Even though you are not paying them in advance, basically, but you have incurred certain expenses which has a longer life, because hospitality books are closed every single month. If we charge all of them in the month of payment, then the profit and loss of one month will be very different from the other months. So usually there is a concept of allocating the prepayments, considering this as a prepaid expenses, and allocating them over a period of their life. So the most useful, most common thing is the rental and uniforms. So these are the expenses which we pay in advance for a period of service. So it's a different from advance, which is usually we recover from the expenses. This is expenses which we have incurred in advance. So we have paid the money, for which the services are has been received already or are going to be received month by month, and we have to amortize these over a period of service. So the idea is to match the room department. So that's the